I stood beside my husband, Owen, gripping his arm with what I hoped looked like a supportive touch. The funeral service droned on, but my mind was elsewhere. The weight of the moment, the weeping relatives, the scent of lilies heavy in the air, the pastor's solemn tone. None of it touched me the way it was supposed to. Not because I didn't respect the dead, but because I had bigger things on my mind. Owen's father had been a powerful man, the kind that left behind a legacy measured in billions. And now, with him gone, Owen was about to step into shoes far too big for his naive feet. I had been patient, so very patient, but time was up. Today was a day of endings, and not just for the man lying in that coffin. Owen stood rigid, staring straight ahead, lost in whatever grief he could summon. He wasn't the type to cry. Even now, his jaw was clenched tight, his hands fisted at his sides, but there was no trace of tears. His relationship with his father had always been complicated. Perhaps that was why it was so easy to time this moment the way I had. I leaned in, pressing my lips close to his ear, my voice a whisper, but laced with unmistakable steel. "I changed the lock on the $30 million condo you got," I murmured, feeling a delicious thrill at the way his shoulders stiffened. "If you're not okay with it, maybe we should split." For a heartbeat there was silence. Then, to my absolute shock, Owen laughed. It wasn't a bitter chuckle, nor a scoff of disbelief. No, this was deep, genuine laughter. The kind that sent heads turning, expressions shifting from grief to bewilderment. His mother's tear-streaked face twisted in confusion. His younger brother, seated 2 rows behind, frowned in concern. The pastor even paused mid-sentence. I swallowed, my heart picking up speed. What the hell was he laughing at? Finally, he turned to me, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. Something dangerous. "That's cute, Anna," he said, his voice low but edged with amusement. "Really? But I think you forgot one little detail." He leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek as he whispered, "The condo isn't in my name." My stomach lurched. He was lying. He had to be lying. I had watched him sign the papers. I had seen the deal go through. The penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows, its sweeping view of the skyline, its ridiculous, overpriced modern art. He had bought it fair and square. But the way he was looking at me now, smug and knowing, made something cold slither down my spine. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the service continued, forcing me into silence. Owen turned away, his face slipping back into its composed mask. But I knew what I had seen in his eyes just now. I had pushed him, and for the first time he was pushing back. I sat through the rest of the funeral in silence, my mind racing. Had I underestimated him? No. That was impossible. I had known Owen for 10 years, married to him for 7. I knew the way he thought. He was predictable, passive, a man who preferred to avoid conflict rather than face it head-on. And yet, today, in the middle of his father's funeral, I had seen something I'd never seen before. The flicker of a man who had just decided he was done playing the fool. This wasn't good. I needed to regain control. And I needed to do it fast. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur, but the tension between Owen and me was thick enough to cut with a knife. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my nails pressing into my palms to keep my composure. The moment the service ended, I slipped away from the sea of mourners, needing a second to think. Owen's laughter still rang in my ears. "The condo isn't in my name." He had to be bluffing. He had to be. I had watched him go through with the purchase, seen the deal close. The realtor had even called to confirm everything was finalized. So why had he looked so damn sure of himself? I pulled my phone out, my fingers shaking slightly as I scrolled through my messages. No updates from the lawyer yet, but that didn't mean anything. I had been planning my next move for months, waiting for the right time to make my exit. The condo was supposed to be mine, my safety net, my proof that this hadn't all been for nothing. I had married Owen for his potential. 10 years ago, he had been just another rich boy coasting on his father's success, but I had seen something in him. Not strength, not ambition, malleability. He was easy to control, easy to manipulate. And I had spent the better part of a decade molding him into the perfect husband. He made the money, I managed the social life. He handled business meetings, I ensured we were a power couple in every circle that mattered. I had earned that condo. But now there was a crack in my carefully laid plans. "Anna," I stiffened, schooling my features before turning around. Owen stood a few feet away, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. The guests were still gathered around his mother, murmuring condolences, but his attention was solely on me. I had to regain control. I forced a soft, sympathetic smile. "Are you okay?" He studied me for a long moment, then let out a quiet chuckle. "I should be asking you that, shouldn't I? Considering you just tried to drop a divorce ultimatum at my father's funeral." I swallowed. He wasn't supposed to react like this. Owen was supposed to look wounded, caught off guard, maybe even angry. But amused? That was new. "I wasn't dropping an ultimatum," I said smoothly, reaching for his hand. I know you're going through a lot right now, and I didn't want to add any more stress. I thought it'd be best to be upfront with you before things got complicated." He arched a brow. "Before things got complicated?" I squeezed his hand, tilting my head like the concerned, loving wife I had perfected being. "I just mean, if we're heading in different directions, isn't it better to be honest? To be fair to each other?" He smirked. God, what was happening? "That's touching, Anna." "Really?" he said, his voice dripping with something just shy of mockery. "But let's cut the act, shall we?" Panic coiled in my stomach. "What act?" I asked, my voice steady. He leaned in just enough that only I could hear. "You were never going to tell me. Not until you were ready to leave. The locks weren't about boundaries, they were about control. You were locking me out, preparing to move on." I froze. Had he always been this perceptive? No. This was new. This was dangerous. I exhaled softly, tilting my chin up. "Owen, that's not. Cut the bullsh *T, Anna." The raw edge in his voice sent a chill down my spine. For the first time in our marriage, Owen wasn't being passive. He wasn't avoiding confrontation. He was starting one. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was already working overtime. He knew more than he was letting on. That much was clear. But how much? I needed to be careful. I needed to get ahead of this. Owen had never looked at me like this before. Not in all the years I had known him. His usual demeanor, calm, composed, almost passive, was gone. Instead, there was something sharper in his eyes, something awake. I had spent years perfecting the balance of our relationship, keeping myself just above him, making sure he never questioned who was in control. And yet, as I stood there, staring at him in the dimming funeral reception hall, I realized something terrifying. I might have miscalculated. The way he spoke, the quiet certainty in his voice, it meant he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to shift the power balance between us. I needed to be smart. Fast. I swallowed and offered the most neutral expression I could manage. "I don't know what you're trying to accuse me of, Owen. But we've both known for a long time that things haven't been working between us." I softened my voice, trying to control the direction of the conversation. "I didn't want to blindside you. I just thought." "You thought I'd roll over," Owen interrupted, his voice even but cold. "That I'd take the hint and let you walk away, keys in hand, no questions asked." I hesitated for half a second. Too long. His lips curled into a smirk. "That's what you do, right? You plan. You anticipate. You set things up so that everything falls into place exactly how you want it." He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "Damn, Anna. You almost had me." I stiffened. My mind was already racing through possible exits, ways to maneuver the conversation back into my favor. But Owen was cutting through my defenses too quickly. This wasn't the man I married. This wasn't the version of him I had trained. I took a careful breath. "Owen," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled, "you're grieving right now. You just lost your father. And I understand that emotions are high. Maybe we should take a step back, talk about this when you've had time to process." He laughed. A low, knowing laugh. I hated that sound, because it meant I had already lost control of the conversation. "You're good," he murmured, shaking his head as if he actually admired me. Deflect, gaslight, make it about me being emotional. Classic. My stomach twisted. This was bad. Owen wasn't supposed to talk like this. He wasn't supposed to think like this. He had always been the kind of man who let me steer the ship, who leaned on my confidence, my guidance. But now he was looking at me like a chess piece instead of his wife. What changed? I had been so careful. Then something clicked. Someone told him. I had spent months planning my exit, years playing my hand carefully. Owen had no reason to suspect anything before now. But his attitude shift, his sudden confidence, the way he was enjoying watching me scramble, this wasn't something he figured out on his own. Someone had planted doubt in his mind. Someone had given him a reason to start digging. Who? I kept my posture relaxed, though every nerve in my body was on high alert. I don't know what you think you figured out, Owen, I said smoothly, tilting my head just slightly. But if we're going to start throwing accusations around, maybe we should have that conversation somewhere private. His jaw twitched just a fraction. Good. He's still human. Still impulsive. I needed to break him out of this newfound confidence before he got too comfortable. Owen glanced over his shoulder briefly. The funeral guests were still murmuring in small groups, far enough away that no one was paying attention to us. His mother sat in the corner, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, unaware that her son was moments away from burning down his marriage. After a beat, Owen nodded. Fine. Let's go. He turned and started walking toward the parking lot. I followed, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed to fix this. Fast. The drive back to our condo was suffocatingly silent. I sat in the passenger seat, keeping my expression composed, my hands folded neatly in my lap as if none of this rattled me. But inside my mind raced. Owen wasn't supposed to be like this. He was supposed to be predictable. He was supposed to avoid confrontation, to hate conflict. That was how I had been able to keep control for all these years, by making sure he never felt the need to question me. But something had changed. Someone had gotten into his head. He was looking at me like an opponent, like a threat. I turned my gaze toward the window, keeping my body language deliberately neutral. If I overreacted, if I got defensive, I would confirm his suspicions. Instead, I needed to turn this around. I needed to plant my own seed of doubt. Are you going to tell me where this is coming from? I asked finally, keeping my tone light, almost amused. Because this sudden personality shift is kind of dramatic, don't you think? Owen's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. That's funny, he said, his voice low. Because I was just about to ask you the same thing. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed to feel out how much he knew. He exhaled through his nose, tapping his thumb against the steering wheel. You know what the funny thing is, Anna? He said, his voice dangerously casual. I probably wouldn't have thought twice about the condo if you hadn't said anything. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? I glanced at him, studying his face carefully. I was being honest with you, I said softly. Something I thought you'd appreciate. He laughed again. That same laugh from the funeral. The one that sent an uneasy chill down my spine. Right. Because honesty has always been your strong suit. I gritted my teeth but kept my face neutral. I needed to regain control. I turned slightly toward him, my expression shifting into something softer, something Owen had always fallen for in the past. Owen, I said gently, I get that you're upset. I get that you're grieving. But you're lashing out at me, and I don't understand why. I let my voice waver slightly, just enough to sound hurt. Not too much. Just enough. His grip on the wheel tightened again. Good. I watched his profile, searching for cracks. Owen had always been easily guilt, easily softened. That was how I had controlled him for so long. Not through force, but through careful emotional precision. For a second I thought I had him. Then, without warning, he let out a breathless chuckle and shook his head. You almost got me, he muttered. My stomach dropped. He turned his head slightly, giving me a knowing look. That's your trick, isn't it? He said. You never lie outright. You just shift things. Make them about something else. Make me feel like I'm the one in the wrong. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Because he was right. For the first time Owen was seeing me. Not as his wife, not as the woman he had trusted for the past decade, but as someone capable of manipulating him. I had lost control. The realization sent a wave of panic through me. How? How had this happened? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to recover. I don't know what's gotten into you, I murmured, shaking my head. But if you're just looking for a fight, I'm not going to give you one. Owen didn't respond. He just kept driving. I knew then that I had to switch tactics. This wasn't about making him doubt himself anymore. That wasn't going to work. Instead, I needed to figure out who had put these thoughts in his head. Because whoever it was, they were ruining everything. And I wasn't about to let that happen to be why the time Owen pulled into the underground parking lot of our condo. My nerves were wound so tightly I thought they might snap. I had been watching him closely the entire drive, searching for any sign of hesitation, any sign that the old Owen, the malleable one, was still in there. But he hadn't cracked. Not once. That meant one thing. He wasn't acting on impulse. Whatever shift had happened, it wasn't just grief or exhaustion. It was deliberate. He knew something, maybe not everything, but enough to start playing his own game. That terrified me more than anything. Because Owen had never played before. He put the car in park, but neither of us moved. The hum of the engine filled the tense silence between us. Finally, he sighed, running a hand over his jaw before turning to face me. "Why don't you go ahead first?" he said, his tone unsettlingly casual. "I just need a second." It wasn't a request. It was a test. If I refused, he'd know I was rattled. But if I got out too fast, he'd know I was scrambling. I forced a small smile, exhaling like I was simply exhausted from the day. "Fine," I murmured. "We can talk about this when you're ready." Then without another word, I stepped out of the car. I walked toward the elevator, my pace deliberate. Not too slow, not too rushed. I knew Owen was watching me. I could feel his gaze burning into my back, assessing, calculating. I needed to act normal. But inside, I was drowning. Who had told him? Who had ruined everything? The elevator doors slid shut. And as soon as I was alone, I yanked my phone out of my purse, unlocking it with shaking fingers. I scrolled through my recent messages, searching for anything that stood out. Then my stomach dropped. A text from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. "Unknown. You should be more careful, Anna. Loose ends have a way of untying themselves." A chill ran down my spine. Who the hell was this? My hands clenched around the phone as panic coiled in my stomach. This wasn't just about Owen anymore. Someone else was involved, someone who wanted me to know they were watching. And if they were watching, they knew everything. The elevator dinged, snapping me out of my spiraling thoughts. The doors slid open, revealing the entrance to our penthouse. I stepped out quickly, slipping my phone back into my purse as I moved toward the front door. I had changed the locks earlier in the week, preparing for my exit, but as I slid the key in, a fresh wave of unease settled over me. Something was wrong. The air inside felt off. The moment I stepped in, I felt it. The atmosphere was different. Subtle but unmistakable. A shift in energy. The faintest disturbance in the order of things. My eyes swept the entryway. Nothing seemed out of place, but my instincts screamed at me. Then I saw it. A glass of whiskey sitting on the kitchen counter. Fresh. Half full. I hadn't poured that. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I slowly set my purse down. I forced my face into a neutral expression as I walked deeper into the condo. Every step measured. Then I heard it. A quiet shift of movement behind me. I turned just as a figure stepped from the shadows of the dimly lit living room. And my stomach plummeted. It was Michael. I froze, my body rigid as my mind caught up. Michael. Owen's closest friend. The only person I had worried about when I started setting my plans into motion. Because Michael had never liked me. He had always seen through me. And now here he was. In my condo. Waiting. For me. Michael leaned against the marble kitchen island, swirling the whiskey in his glass, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I forced myself to stay still, to not react. Inside, my mind was screaming. Owen's best friend. His oldest friend. The one person who had never fully trusted me, no matter how much charm I had thrown his way. And now he was here. In my condo. Uninvited. "How did you get in?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Michael took a slow sip of his drink, unbothered, unaffected. "Turns out money buys a lot of things," he said smoothly. "Including building security." I clenched my teeth. I should have expected this. Michael wasn't like Owen. He was sharper. Unbreakable. And unlike my husband, he had never been someone I could manipulate. I had spent years subtly keeping him at arm's length, ensuring Owen valued my word over his. But now, standing here in my home, he was looking at me like he had already figured out the ending to my game. And that was a problem. I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly, giving him the same neutral expression I had perfected over the years. So, are you here as Owen's personal investigator? Or are you just trying to intimidate me? Michael smirked. Why? Are you intimidated? I didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. He placed his glass down, stepping forward slightly, closing the distance between us. I held my ground, but my heartbeat hammered violently in my chest. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Owen doesn't know everything yet. I stiffened. Yet. That word carried weight. Michael was holding something over me. Something Owen didn't know. Something worse than just the condo. I swallowed, keeping my face neutral. And what exactly is it that you think you know? Michael exhaled, rubbing his jaw like he was enjoying this. Like he had been waiting for this moment. I know you've been siphoning money for months, he said, his voice maddeningly calm. Slow enough that Owen wouldn't notice. A little at a time. Moving it into accounts he doesn't even know exist. Shit. I kept my face impassive, but my pulse was thundering. Michael watched me carefully. I know you never planned on staying, Anna. The condo. That was just the start, wasn't it? I didn't answer. 'Cause he was right. I had been so careful. So precise. The money was supposed to be untraceable. Siphoned through investments. Accounts buried under layers of legal protection. There was no way Michael could have pieced that together. Unless. I inhaled sharply. You had someone look into me. Michael's smirk deepened. Not just anyone, he said. Forensic accountants. Some of the best in the business. The kind you don't even know are tracking you until it's too late. My stomach plummeted. I had underestimated him. I had underestimated all of them. For years, I had worked under the assumption that Owen would never catch on. That he would never fight back. But Michael? Michael wasn't Owen. Michael had been watching me. And now I was backed into a corner. I needed to regain control. Fast. I forced a small, amused smile, tilting my head slightly. And what exactly do you plan on doing with this information, Michael? His gaze darkened. That depends. I raised a brow. On what? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. On how smart you are about what you do next. I swallowed. This was a warning. A final warning. Michael wasn't here just to confront me. He was here to let me know that my time was up. Owen was coming for me. And if I didn't act now, I would lose everything. Michael's words hung in the air like a noose, tightening with each second of silence. Owen doesn't know everything yet. Yet. He was holding back. That meant I still had time, but not much. I forced a slow breath, tilting my head slightly, feigning composure. So that's it. I murmured, eyes locking onto his. You came all this way just to threaten me? Michael chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, Anna. This isn't a threat. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. This is a favor. I stiffened. Excuse me. He studied me for a long moment before speaking again. Do you really think I care what happens to you? He said smoothly. I don't. But Owen? He still does. That was a problem. If Owen still cared, he might hesitate. And hesitation was dangerous. If I could get even a sliver of doubt planted in his mind, make him think he was wrong about me, it might be enough to buy time. I needed time. I swallowed. And what exactly does this favor entail? Michael smirked. You walk away. The words hit me like a slap. Walk away. He wanted me to abandon everything I had worked for? The condo. The money. The life. He had no idea how much I had sacrificed to get here. The years I had spent carefully constructing this perfect existence. And now he wanted me to leave with nothing? I exhaled through my nose, keeping my expression composed. That's cute, I murmured, crossing my arms. You think you have control over what I do. Michael's jaw twitched just slightly. Good. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to match his. You think I don't see what you're doing? I whispered. You're testing me. Seeing if I'll crack. I tilted my head slightly, my lips curling into the faintest smile. But here's the thing, Michael. You don't scare me. He studied me for a long moment. Then to my surprise he smiled. It wasn't amusement. It was something darker. I was hoping you'd say that, he murmured. A cold prickle ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. Michael wasn't rattled. He wasn't reacting the way I expected. And that meant I was the one being played. I swallowed hard, the air in the condo suddenly feeling suffocating. You know what? I said, forcing a laugh. This conversation is a waste of time. You want me to walk away? Fine. I'll think about it. Michael smirked. You do that. He stepped back, grabbed his whiskey glass and turned toward the door. But before he left, he paused, glancing at me over his shoulder. Oh, and Anna, he said casually. I kept my expression neutral. What? Michael smiled. You're not the only one who changed the locks. And then just like that he walked out. I stood there, my pulse hammering in my ears. Not the only one who changed the locks. What did that mean? I turned, scanning the condo, my condo, but suddenly it didn't feel like mine anymore. Felt compromised. Like something had shifted under my feet and I hadn't even noticed. I hurried to my purse, yanking my phone out, my fingers trembling as I pulled up my banking app. I typed in my login. Error. I tried again. Incorrect credentials. My throat tightened. I switched to the offshore account, the one I had meticulously built over months, moving small amounts at a time, just enough to avoid suspicion. Access denied. A slow, horrifying realization crept over me. Michael's words replayed in my head. Owen doesn't know everything yet. But he knew enough. And he had already made his move. I had been so focused on controlling Owen that I hadn't realized. He was finally playing the game too. And I was losing. Panic clawed at my throat as I tried logging in again. Incorrect credentials. I switched apps, desperately searching for a loophole, an access point, anything. Error. My accounts, all of them, had been locked down. The money was gone. Owen had done this. Owen. The man I had spent years controlling, years molding into the perfect husband. He had seen me coming. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. Owen. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to inhale, to smooth my expression before walking over and opening the door. He stepped inside casually, setting his car keys on the table like he hadn't just stolen everything from me. How was your chat with Michael? He asked, his tone light. My fingers twitched. He knew. He knew everything. I lifted my chin, feigning indifference. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but... Owen's smirk sent a chill through me. You don't get to say that anymore. He stepped closer, voice dropping. You've been playing this game for years, Anna. Moving money behind my back, preparing to leave the second it suited you. He cocked his head. You thought I wouldn't figure it out, didn't you? My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. He exhaled, shaking his head. You were always so careful. But there was one thing you never accounted for. I swallowed hard. What? What had I missed? Owen pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. A video. My heart stopped. I knew that hotel room. I knew the man in that bed. No. The footage played, grainy but damning. Me sliding out from under silk sheets, reaching for my phone, my lover murmuring something before pulling me back down. My breath caught. You. Had you followed? Owen finished for me. Yes. Months ago. I stared at the screen, my entire body numb. He had known before I even changed the locks. Before I even started siphoning the money. I forced a slow breath, tilting my chin up. So what now? Owen smirked. Now? Now I take back what's mine. He gestured around the penthouse. All of this? None of it belongs to you anymore. My stomach lurched. He was serious. I had spent years carefully curating this life, positioning myself in the perfect place to win. And in a matter of days, Owen had flipped the board. My hands clenched into fists, my mind racing. I couldn't let him take everything. I exhaled, softening my expression. Owen, I murmured, stepping closer. We don't have to do this. I made mistakes, I know that. But we were happy once, weren't we? I placed a hand on his arm, feeling him tense beneath my touch. This was my chance. I had to break him before he broke me. I was scared, I whispered. I thought you were pulling away, and I... Owen's laughter made my stomach drop. He wasn't buying it. He always used to buy it. But now his smirk only deepened. That's cute, he said, stepping back. You actually thought I'd fall for that? My throat tightened. He walked to the bar, poured himself a drink, then turned back to me. You see, Anna, you had all the power for years. You lied, you manipulated, you built an escape plan right under my nose. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. And for a long time I let you. He took a slow sip. But the moment you decided to take me for a fool? That's when you lost. His words sliced through me. This wasn't Owen. This was someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. You have until tomorrow, he said, setting his glass down with a soft clink. Pack your things. Then get out. My breath caught. Tomorrow? I stared at him, my mind racing. He thought he had one. He thought I had no way out. He was wrong. I wasn't leaving without a fight. Tomorrow. He actually thought I would walk away tomorrow. I stood frozen as Owen leaned against the bar, watching me like a predator that had already won. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I inhaled slowly, forcing my body to stay still, my expression unreadable. And what if I don't leave? I murmured. Owen's smirk widened slightly. He had been waiting for this question. Then you lose more than just the condo, he said simply. I've already frozen the accounts. You can't access a single dollar. No cash, no investments, no offshore safety net. He took a sip of his drink, savoring it. And if you fight me, I'll take the next step. My stomach tightened. And what step is that? He exhaled slowly, tilting his head. I make sure you have nothing. No money, no reputation, no way to rebuild. He shrugged. I have the video, Anna. And trust me, the right people will see it. A sharp, cold panic flooded through me. He wasn't bluffing. For years I had owned this game. Controlled every move, played every piece with precision. But Owen, my quiet, predictable husband, had outmaneuvered me. And now he was enjoying it. I had underestimated him. Michael had been the warning shot. The frozen accounts were the execution. The video was the final nail in my coffin. But I wasn't done. I forced a slow breath, letting my shoulders relax, my voice softening. You really hate me that much? Owen chuckled. Oh no. Hate is emotional. I'm just done. I studied him carefully. He believed he had one. That was my opening. I exhaled, nodding slightly. Fine, I murmured. You win. Owen's smirk flickered just for a second. A hint of uncertainty. That was all I needed. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. If he thought I was plotting something, he'd watch me closer. I needed him to think I was defeated. I closed the door softly behind me, pressing my back against the wood, forcing my breathing to stay even. Think. Owen had the video. That was the real problem. The money, the condo, those things were recoverable. But if he released that footage, my name would be ruined. No high society divorce settlement. No cushioned exit. I had to get rid of it. And I had one last move to play. I grabbed my phone, opening the only message that mattered. Unknown. You should be more careful, Anna. Loose ends have a way of untying themselves. I had ignored the message before. Now I was ready to respond. I typed quickly. I need to meet. Tonight. A few seconds passed. Then, unknown where? I exhaled. Hook. Line. Sinker. I glanced at the bedroom door, listening for movement. Owen was still in the living room, probably savoring his victory. He had no idea I had just made my last move. And this time I wasn't playing fair. Owen thought I was beaten. He thought he had stripped me of everything, the money, the security, the power. But he didn't know that I still had one last play. One final hand that, if I played it right, could turn the entire game around. And I was willing to do whatever it took to win. The response from the unknown number still glowed on my screen. Unknown where? I typed fast. Midnight. The parking garage under the condo. Come alone. The reply was instant. Understood. I deleted the thread, locked my phone, and shoved it into my purse. Owen was still in the living room, pacing near the bar, rolling his whiskey glass between his fingers, convinced he had one. I stepped out of the bedroom slowly, keeping my voice even. I'll pack a few things, I murmured. Leave in the morning. Owen smirked, but I saw the flicker of suspicion behind his eyes. Good choice. I gave a small nod and walked past him, heading toward the kitchen. I needed him to see me moving normally, acting defeated. Because if Owen thought I was planning something, he'd watch me. And I needed him to let his guard down. The hours crawled by. I pretended to pack, pulling clothes from the closet in slow, mindless motions. I ignored Owen. Ignored the rage and humiliation simmering beneath my skin. Focused only on the goal. When the clock hit 11:45 p.m., I grabbed my purse and slipped quietly out of the penthouse. I made my way down to the underground parking garage, the heels of my Louboutins echoing against the cold concrete. The air was thick with oil and gasoline, the flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows along the rows of parked cars. Then I saw him. A tall figure leaned against a sleek black car, hands in his pockets, watching me. Michael. I stopped a few feet away, heart hammering, my breath steady but calculated. You came alone, I murmured. Michael's smirk was faint. Unlike you, I keep my word. I ignored the dig. I assume you already know why I called. Michael sighed, shaking his head slightly. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I don't quit, I said flatly. I win. He exhaled through his nose, almost amused. You lost, Anna. I took a slow step closer. Not yet. Michael studied me for a long moment before speaking again. What do you want? The video. His expression didn't change, but I saw the faintest flicker of something behind his eyes. I know Owen gave it to you, I continued. You're the only person he trusts to handle something like that. He wouldn't risk keeping it himself. I tilted my head. Which means you have it. Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. I want it gone, I said smoothly. Deleted. Destroyed. And in exchange I'll walk away. No games. No revenge. Michael let out a short laugh. You must think I'm an idiot. I shrugged. I think you're a man who wants this to be over. And we both know that as long as that video exists, I am never out of the game. Michael stared at me, the silence stretching between us. Then finally he exhaled, rubbing his jaw. You always have an angle, don't you? I smiled. Of course. A long pause. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. I held my breath. Michael tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward me. A folder. Labeled with my name. My stomach twisted. He really had everything. But then he swiped left. And I watched as the files disappeared. One by one. Gone. The moment the last one vanished, he locked the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. There, he said. Now walk away. I forced my body to stay still, my face neutral, even as a hurricane of relief tore through me. Michael turned, reaching for his car door. Then, just as he opened it, he glanced over his shoulder. And Anna. I met his gaze, waiting. His smirk returned. Dark. Certain. You think you won, he said. But Owen never needed the video to destroy you. A chill ran through me. Michael slid into his car, slammed the door shut, and drove off into the night. I stood there, frozen, as his words sank in. Because I knew he was right. Owen had beaten me. And I had no idea what was coming next. The game was over. And for the first time in my life, I had lost.